I thought it'd be a bit of fun and I thought it'd be good.
Drew Pritchard from Salvage Hunters changed just about every single part of his life.
There's a lot of downsides.
He divorced his wife, closed his antique shops, and moved out of the town that was his home for decades, and now he's finally revealing why he did it. What is he up to now? And what does all of this mean for the future of the show? Drew Pritchard always seemed to be doing really well for himself, especially after Salvage Hunters blew up and his little shop became famous. It looked like things were going great for him. His life was nearly perfect, but then one day, he just turned around and left almost all of it behind. He moved to a different town and started a new life there, but the big change didn't come as out of nowhere as it might look. Behind the scenes, things had actually been falling apart for him for a while, and at the core of it all was his relationship with his then wife. If you're a big Salvage Hunters fan, you will actually know Drew's wife from the show, because for years she's been helping out and playing a key role on the show. Her name is Rebecca Pritchard. She's the one who always does research and knows a lot of stuff about the objects that Drew brings in from his hunts. But in private, her and Drew's relationship had actually been going downhill for a while. They were together for a long time too. They got married back in the 90s, and their first kid was born in 1999. They also had a second kid after that, and it was no doubt a very chaotic family life, with 2 kids and a whole antique business on the side. But then it all came crashing down for them, and the downfall of their marriage was actually apparently all Drew's fault. He had allegedly been cheating on his wife and had an affair on the side for years before Rebecca found out about it. But when she did find out, it didn't take long before she filed for divorce from Drew. And I mean, who could blame her for that? But the interesting thing is that even though they got divorced, they still continued working together on the show. This is especially shocking when you consider that they probably didn't end their marriage on the best of terms. Whenever the reason for divorce is infidelity, things tend to get super messy. So it's actually fascinating that Rebecca and Drew managed to stay on good enough terms to be able to keep working together. But even so, you can imagine that the atmosphere on set was probably not the best. The two of them got divorced in 2017, so it's been a few years by now, and they've still had to work together the whole time through their divorce and all. And at some point, it all just got too much for Drew to handle. He knew he had to get out of there and change something about his life, and he chose to change almost everything. For one, he closed his antique store on the high street of the town of Conway, and he moved to a completely different place, even though Conway had been his home for all his life up until that point. But he found something in his new town that he had wanted all his life, and it was actually his dream house. He had been thinking for a while of just dropping everything and leaving his old life behind, and he had been looking on the property market for just the perfect thing, and then he found this beautiful townhouse in the city of Bath. But initially, he wasn't able to afford the house at all. It's actually a really big house. It has 5 stories, and it used to be divided into 5 flats before Drew bought it. You could almost call it a mansion, except it doesn't actually stand alone on its own massive strip of land like mansions do. Anyway, even for someone like Drew, who has his own TV show, the house was way too expensive at first. He just wasn't able to afford it and had to pass on buying it, even though he really liked it. But luckily for him, nobody else bought the house either. And after about 2 years, the price actually got reduced, which is when Drew actually made the trip to view the house, and as soon as he saw it in person, he absolutely fell in love. He told the reality agent right then and there that he would buy the house, and the way he explains it is actually pretty poetic. He said that he immediately knew that the house was an absolute gem, and I mean, Drew has always been drawn to old things of all kinds. That's how he got into the antique business in the first place. He's always had an eye and a natural sense for what's worth paying attention to, and I bet the house just gave him those same feelings as finding a new and exciting antique object, only on a much bigger scale because it was about to change his life completely. He knew he wanted to renovate the house and restore it to its original historical form. He also talked a little bit about his plans with that, and he's actually going pretty far. The house was actually built in the late 1700s, and Drew said that he wants to restore it to how it was immediately after it was built in the year 1790. He's planning to be super authentic about it too. He's going to use historical paints that would have been used back in the day, and he even plans to add some so-called period bathroom features. Now, the last point is actually a slight worrying idea because obviously back in the 1700s they didn't have the kind of modern bathrooms we have now, and a lot of the bathroom features from back then would seem pretty ancient from today's point of view. And the thing is, Drew isn't being very specific about which parts of his bathrooms he wants to restore to their original forms. I mean, is he planning to have a historical 17,000s toilet in his house? It'll definitely be interesting to see what he meant by period bathroom features. Hopefully he'll share some pictures of his home renovations at some point, but restoring a historical house to its original form is actually really fitting for Drew. He's been obsessed with antiques for his whole life, and now he's going to be pretty much living inside one. He seems really excited about that prospect, but the move really does mark the end of a chapter for him. And I mean, his whole life he had just lived in Conway. That's where his family and life were all at. Even his childhood home was there, and obviously his famous antique shop. But one thing that he's not leaving behind is the show itself, Salvage Hunters. The show didn't end after his and Rebecca's messy divorce, and it also didn't end with him closing his shop and leaving his hometown. Season 17 has just been on air recently, and there's no sign of the show getting canceled. But even though we're probably getting more Salvage Hunters in the future, the show will never be the same again. But this time it's not actually because of Drew or even Rebecca. It's actually Drew's friend and assistant John T, who announced he's going to be leaving the show. And this is a sad loss because he was a lot of people's favorite person on the show. He always traveled with Drew, drove his truck, and helped him load the heavy stuff in. But he also brought his nice guy energy along for the journey. And now that he's leaving the show, we're not going to be able to see that anymore. He will definitely be missed by both us viewers and Drew and the production team. But anyway, what do you guys think? Who is your favorite person on Salvage Hunters, and do you think Drew will actually install period toilets in his new house? Let me know in the comments below.